Perfect. All right. You guys doing well?
Yes.
Good, good, good. Well, so I just wanted to take some time and give you guys an opportunity to share about your higher ed leader profile, just about who you interviewed and one to two or two characteristics that you got from that. And then I want to talk a little bit about the strategic plans, how that process is going, and seeing if you guys have any questions related to that. So, and we don't have to go in any particular order with this part. So if there's somebody who would like to lead out, that is great.
I can go if that works.
Sure.
So one thing I found particularly interesting about the higher ed leader profile was how similar my leadership philosophy was to the leader who I interviewed.
I think you're breaking up. Is she
Is
breaking up? Okay.
I think it's because the speaker's on both.
So
So one has to be muted.
am I breaking up too?
No, I think it's because there's two. So there's like bouncing off of each other.
Do you want
So
to?
if you like mute one,
Sure.
then
Okay.
we can
We're
probably
just
hear
going
better.
to do this together.
Okay.
Oh, on mine.
Yeah. No, on
On
mine.
yours.
Yeah.
Oh.
Can you close that though?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that better?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting how closely related my leadership philosophy was to the leader who I interviewed. For example, I put growth mindset as one of the most valuable traits of a leader on my leadership philosophy, and that also was clearly a value of the person I interviewed as well. He kind of described how he always wanted to work with international students. I interviewed the director of international student services at Gettysburg College, and he always wanted to work with international students, but there were no opportunities for that. At his college, there wasn't opportunities to study abroad, or there weren't any international students at his college, but he still his first job out of college he took was abroad. So he kind of always embrace these learning opportunities. And then the second interesting thing was how a leadership strength can also be a leadership weakness. And so one of my leader's greatest leadership strengths is he's a very relational leader. And he even said that his leadership wouldn't be as effective without being relational. But while it lets him be a good listener and have lots of empathy and credibility with his students, it can get in the way of other leadership tasks like strategic planning and project deadlines and mundane office tasks. I interned in the office there at Gettysburg, and I rarely saw my supervisor because he was never at his desk. He was always at a meeting of some sort. And I kind of recommended in the leader profile that he should probably block out some time on his calendar, uninterrupted, to sit down and do those projects at his desk. And maybe he could even have office hours for international students, because right now they kind of just barge in his office whenever they want. So yeah.
That's great. Yeah, it was neat because Leanne did some recommendations for her for her leader, which I thought was kind of neat. Just based off of what she observed about him, she would recommend, like she said, creating more space for this and that, but also affirming a lot of what he did as well. So I thought that was kind of cool that you went down that direction as well. So it's great. Anybody else want to go?
I interviewed Julie Price from Messiah. She's one of the residence directors for upperclassmen. And that was a really valuable experience, just because that's something I've kind of been looking at as far as jobs after grad school, and wanted to gain a little bit more insight since I don't really have a background as a resident assistant. And I think that's the general path that people take. And I knew that Julie didn't have that linear path either. So that's kind of the reason I wanted to hear a bit more about her story. And two of the key takeaways that I had from the interview with her involved the faith aspect. She highlighted that she tries to integrate faith into how she develops student leaders, like her RAs, and that's kind of a vital component of how she leads. So that was really helpful to hear, thinking through, places that I would apply, or because I think I would really like to be at an institution that kind of values that and integrates that into learning. So that was helpful. And then the other component or characteristic was Julie's flexibility. I could see, even as she was coming over to meet, just her flexibility, and she would always have people, stopping by, "Oh, Julie," and, make different comments. So that was neat to see just kind of how she handled, you have to be flexible, and she definitely made that known throughout our conversation, that it's something that she personally has had to work on, but it was neat to kind of have that as a takeaway. She's done an awesome job of implementing that into her work and life.
It's funny, Tara, I thought it was neat how you said, I want to learn more about this because I haven't had that opportunity in the past 2 years to really get into what res life entails, and, whether or not you go down that path or not. I think I said that early on, this can be an opportunity to learn more about a specific area. So I was excited to read that in your paper, that you were able to kind of just learn even more about an area, let alone a leader, by doing the project. So that's good. Anybody else?
I can go ahead. So I interviewed Katie Rosopoulos in the intercultural office at Messiah. Her job is assistant director of off-campus programs. So the two things that I really appreciated most about Katie is she expects excellence in all the people that she supervises, but then not only that, but she follows through on like her end and creates an environment that is really conducive to allowing them to succeed. And I really liked her slogan. She says, "Tight ship, party ship." So she runs a tight ship, but she runs a party ship. I appreciated that. Yeah. And then the second one was, and this goes along with, who said their strength can also be Leanne. With Katie, like figuring out the balance between extending grace and like demanding perfection, I guess. I think that my leadership style and Katie's leadership style is like, I want to just like keep giving grace upon grace upon grace upon grace, but like trying to figure out that balance of, you can't always give grace if the person you're leading isn't holding up on their expectations. So I appreciated talking to her a little bit about that, and how she handles situations like that. So, yep.
And can you tell them about the example in the airport? I thought that was a really good.
So Katie used to lead international service learning trips for Taylor, which is like what I do in my graduate assistantship. And so she was saying that, like being a leader, you have to be really calm in high stress situations, especially if you're working with international situations or like different cultures and transportation and stuff. So Indiana had this like huge snowstorm come through, and Katie had to decide if they were going to send their trips to the airport to leave or not. And so the airline wasn't canceling the flights, and they were like, well, we're going to lose a lot of money, so we'll send them anyways. And then they get there and they cancel the flights, but at that point it's too late for the students to get back because the conditions are too bad. And so she had to like all the stores are closed, so there's like no food for the students. They had to figure out some sort of housing situation, like managing emotional needs and everything. And she's like, and I had to do it from a distance. So like trying to manage 1 million different things at once and remaining calm and collected through all of it, which she apparently did. So that's a skill.
That's right. And she had some material for the next interview she did.
There, yes. Yeah.
Problem solving. That's great. Thanks, Ashley.
Hmm?
Charlito,
Yes.
how are you?
So I interviewed my coach at Penn State Harrisburg, Danielle Lynch, who's just like an awesome human being, and I thought like was very fitting. Like I was originally gonna interview Chris Hansen Kiefer because I wanted to email some interview. I don't know why I just keep saying email. Interview somebody in a position that I didn't know a lot about and like kind of what they did. But then sort of some things fell through, and I was like, wait, I have this awesome person that I could just quick interview after one of our conference meets. So it just kind of worked out. But it was great to hear her story. This is like my second year working with her. So a lot of what she was telling me, like I hadn't known in the past because one, I'm very, very part-time, very away. I'm not as much mentored by her like on the day-to-day. It's usually typically on the weekends or texting. But just hearing her, transition from she was working, I even forget what it was, but she was wanting to work in like sort of like the humanities, working in like disaster management. And then like through one opportunity after another, she worked her way up in coaching. Started out at West Point, then to Bucknell, where then she got her master's, and then having her decision after that, she landed at Penn State Harrisburg. It was cool to see a lot of the adversity she faced. I shared with several people in posts that she was not like she got like the bottom end of the stick, or I don't know if that's an analogy, but I'll use
Short
it.
end of the stick.
What? Whatever. But she, they gave her the athletes that like nobody really wanted to spend the time with. The athletes that just like weren't quite there. And she would like transform them, like their outlook on track and field and their talents throughout, and get them into positions where they weren't scoring before, but now they are. So it was really cool to see that, like, even getting such a stupid, silly situation that she wasn't being respected. One, because she was a black woman, but two, that's just like, I guess that's how it was during the time. But like she dealt with it and she worked her way up. Even at Bucknell, she dealt with the same thing. So she knew that she had to, kind of run her own ship. And that's why she's at Penn State. I appreciated a lot how she goes about coaching because she's very non-traditional. I think this is similar to not all coaches, but like a lot of coaches that have dealt with like stupid people and stupid personalities. How she's very no nonsense. If you give her attitude or like don't listen to her the way that she feels that you should, or you show a lack of disrespect, you're pretty much gone. Last year alone, we lost an All-American and another multi-athlete who was really good, for our conference, because they wanted to like kind of run their own ship, and she was like, "Yeah, I'm not having this. You're not going to tell me how to coach you," and they just left. But like she has so much integrity as a person. I would say she won. We had our conference meet last weekend. She won Women's Head Coach of the Year, and that says a lot because she is very well respected by most anybody that I know. Even where she started, she might not have got that, but like she knows her stuff. Very talented in her craft. So it was a good pleasure to interview and kind of get to know. I don't want to be a head coach. There's a lot there that is just not for me. She speaks about recruiting and how she has very difficulty. Well, she's a mom of two and also pursuing a doctorate. So like Dottie, you were in the same situation, and to be a track coach is very rough. You have no time, no weekends to yourself. So to do all of that is very incredible, and something that like inspires me to be like, well, if she can do it, I can't sit here crying about my grad work and my track stuff, because she's doing that too, at a higher level. So it was good to learn about her, and like some things that I can sort of adapt as I see. I think I coach my athletes. I show a lack of inspiring vision, and she does very well with what she has. Like, we have very talented athletes. So I really wanted to get that from her and be like, how does she do that well? And it's like a lot of like what we've discussed in classes in our posts. So she's like top tier leadership material, even though she doesn't think so, but I think so.
That's awesome. Did you by any chance ask her what she's gonna do like long term? I forget if you talked.
Yeah. She's very respectful with like crappy situations too, because I know the organizational culture at Penn State Harrisburg, and it sucks. It's like they just they have a lot to like go through and improve upon, especially within like communication, and like support within their department. So she wanted to pursue her doctorate because kind of that like upbringing of her journey through coaching, that she doesn't want to be turned away from an opportunity that she is qualified for. So she wants to get that degree, her EDD, just so that, you know, if an opportunity comes her way that she feels that she can really excel and go towards, that it won't be turned away because she doesn't have the proper credentials. She does want to, she'll stick with coaching for as long as she can, but eventually work up in a intercollegiate administration, because she can do some good work, and she has done some good work at Penn State Harrisburg so far.
Good. Very good. Thank you. Rachel or Amy, either of you?
I'll go. So like Charlita was saying, I found that I didn't really know much about the person I interviewed. Well, Charlita knew a lot about the person, but I didn't know a lot about what she went through to get to where she was. So I interviewed Cindy Goforth, and she is the director of the academic English program at Messiah. And so that program works with international students at Messiah who need extra help with their English because they're not quite at the like fluency level of like, you know, thriving in college with their English. So she works a lot with like, you know, English language learners, and it's like a newer program. So she is actually like the first director of it. It's only 4 years old, and she's just like working with establishing it and getting it off the ground, and like really trying to make sure that, you know, it's a small program, but that it does well and, you know, remains at Messiah. So anyways, Cindy, also, like, what I was really impressed was that she actually had no intention of like going into this at all in the beginning. She started off as a person who majored in business and finance, and she became like a financial manager by the time she was like 25. Like, she was a leader from like, it, you know, progressed really quickly once she got out of college. But then her life circumstances like completely changed, and she had to like reprioritize her life because at that point in her mid-20s, I guess, she was pregnant with her daughter. And she got cancer. And so she pulled out of like this amazing career that she had to, well, heal, and also just to like really invest in her family. And like, she saw like her daughter such an amazing gift, because after that she couldn't have more children. So she spent like 15 years out of the scenes of like career stuff, raising her daughter. But then like through that experience, she said that like God was like calling her in a different direction. And she had this passion for teaching she found in like leading a Bible study and then working with an international ministry with her church. And so through that, she decided to go back to school and get her master's in TESOL, which is teaching English to speakers of other languages. And then from that, she, fell into she, climbed into her role of being the director of the academic English program. And so I saw like from her was like she had this amazing foundation and grounding in like what her priorities are, what matters to her. She sees like this job as like a calling and not just like, something to do. So she actually like she made a big move to come to Messiah. She was from like Kansas. And she invests a lot in like making sure this program does well because we're talking about prioritization. This is a really small program. Messiah doesn't have all that many international students. And the ones that we do have, only a smaller portion of them actually need the services of this program. So this program only serves like 15 students currently. So in the big scale of Messiah College, that's really small. And with prioritization, she needs to like constantly defend it as like a valuable program. So this is something she's really passionate about, and she's like willing to put herself in a role of like service and support of everyone like in the department and of the students. She does like extra things that aren't in her job description just to make sure that it thrives. So I was really impressed by that. And what else? Let's see. So like she's also like really grounded in her faith. Like she wants to have everyone she interacts with, she wants them to like see her faith and like see, God working through her. So she prays with people she meets with. Like she prayed with me after our interview, which I thought that was like the sweetest thing. And so like she reads, like she had this book there that was like teaching like Jesus, and she like pulled it out, and like it was kind of like her leadership philosophy with teaching, which I thought was really cool too. So as a leader, I hope that people kind of see that spirit in me too. And also just, I really love her servant attitude. So.
Yeah, I thought that was really neat that she prayed with you at the end.
Yeah, I loved it. Yeah.
Cool. Yep. Thanks, Rachel.
Yep.
Amy?
Sure. So I actually interviewed Dr. Lori Hack, who is now a professor emeritus from Temple University, but she served many years, almost over 10 years, as the director of Temple's physical therapy program many moons ago. How I know her, though, is she's actually been a mentor to me, but more on a professional level in the field of physical therapy and my activism in our professional association. So it was interesting to sit down with her and talk more on the higher education level, which is where she obviously started and thrived. And I think, the characteristics that just stand out about her, both as a professional, like peer-to-peer for me, as well as with her students, is that she takes on this philosophy of basically sort of building confidence and competence in the people that she mentors. And she's really good at it. She's really good at helping people build those skills that they need to get them where they need to be. And she's definitely that the fire that is under your butt, so to speak. But then as soon as you get to where you're supposed to be, she's very good at stepping back and sort of disappearing into the shadows or disappearing into the trees, and just lets you run your show and do your thing. And even though that she definitely was part of it, she doesn't take any credit for that, which I really appreciate in a leader. and somebody who is passing on leadership to the next generation, I would say. And then just her optimism with working with others, which is funny because, again, I know her as a professional colleague. And if you ever sat next to her, she definitely has these sly comments that sometimes she makes, which I didn't write that in my paper, but it's funny to just get her take on some situations that have occurred to her, mostly in higher education. One, for example, was when she actually became director of the PT program. She talked about how there was a faculty member that just was very negative, not team oriented. It was really bringing down the rest of the staff, and how she had to stay very optimistic and try and be affirmative to the rest of the team to make sure that, you know, those people didn't get dragged down with this individual. And in the end, the individual ended up leaving and it all worked out. But she talked about just how hard that was to not be able to, turn that individual around, and then just have to be able to still move the team forward, even though there was this negative energy in the room at times. And I think that can be really hard in any situation, you know, whether it's in higher education or whatever situation you're in. You know, when you have those Debbie Downers, so to speak, it is hard when you're trying to kind of move the group forward, and there's this anchor that's keeping you back.
Oh yes, that is truth right there. So. And this was the woman that you were staying with when we had the last class, is that right? Was it
No, actually, that was somebody else. That
okay.
She was the president of the Physical Therapy Association. Her name's Colleen. No.
Oh, okay.
Two different people, but yeah.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Well, Rachel, you kind of talked a little bit about this, but I'm wondering if there's anybody, and perhaps the person you interviewed didn't, maybe they don't have a strong faith commitment, which would be, you know, fine. But if they did, was there anybody who talked about how they lead, like the way that they lead being informed by their faith, or how their faith informs the way they lead? Did anybody that I say, Rachel, you definitely addressed this when you were talking about Cindy, but is there anybody else who picked up on that?
I know when I talked to Julie, we discussed that a bit. And she used a certain phrase. I'm trying to remember exactly what it was, but it was along the lines of, when she's leading others, she wants to lead them towards Jesus. And so she used that platform of Christ and wanted to really incorporate that into conversation, and not just have it be her own leadership philosophy, but have it be visible and something that she can teach others to integrate into their leadership as well.
That's cool. Yeah, I remember you writing about that, Tara. And it's funny because Kozus and Posner talk about characteristics that I would deem are like principles of Christianity or faith, but they don't directly say, you know, like Christian faith per se, but, you know, talking about certain characteristics. And I think, like, as I read it as a Christian, I interpret that out of my own lens, you know, like
right.
When I'm working with people, I see this, and similar to what you're saying about like Julie Price, how she tries to draw this out of people, you know. And I mean, some people will want that and other people won't, but it's kind of, I think it's neat to think about your faith can inform yet another sort of aspect of your leadership as well. So I know that the, you know, business and leadership program really gets into how that work. Like they talk about servant leadership and they really get in. So Charlito, you might actually be able to speak to that more than anybody, but and we don't really touch on that as much in this class, but I just wondered if any of you guys had talked to people either in this assignment or as you're reading, you identify, oh, and you're right here too, Leanne, you may have something to say, but you identify with those characteristics as you think about how, and a lot of you guys actually address this in your leadership philosophy. But as you think about how others lead, how, if you sort of pick up on those characteristics, so.
Yeah, it's interesting. I can't really tell if Brad Lancaster, who is the person I interviewed, if he's a Christian or not. But part of that, I think, is just the context that he's in. Like, he's at Gettysburg College, which is definitely not a Christian college. And then also, he's working with international students. So, like, they're kind of from all different backgrounds when it comes to faith. So, I don't know if it's just like in order to remain open to those students, like, he's not really outward about his faith, so I don't really know what it is either. But I do know, on the other hand, though, his administrative assistant, she is a little bit more vocal about faith, and like she and I would have conversations about that during my internship, like not necessarily when other students were around, but just one-on-one, like as adults we would have conversations. But yeah, I don't know what anyone else's thoughts are, like, with how, maybe it's easier to tell, like, how someone's faith guides their leadership, like, depending on their context. I mean, because in a Christian college, you can be a lot more outright with, like, being a Christian leader than you can at, like, Gettysburg College, which is a secular college.
Anybody have thoughts?
I know I did not talk about any sort of faith component with Lori, but I know, again, her personally, and I know she's Catholic because I'm Catholic, because she and I once had a conversation about the current Pope, but in a totally different, not in this interview, in a totally different context at a different time. And so, yeah, but I guess in some ways, even though I don't feel like anything that in my interviewing with her this time really stood out to me as being more faith-based, I can see, as you talked about, Dottie, like with the leadership, from the authors with the leadership challenge, that there are definitely undertones of Christian values or beliefs. I mean, even just like the modeling the way, almost I feel like, like Jesus and his disciples and things, things of that sort. So, but in my conversation with Lori, I didn't really feel like that came across, and I didn't really ask her, and I'm not sure why I didn't.
Well, I don't know that you actually have to ask somebody. I think a lot of it, you take the time to sort of pause and reflect and think about those things. And that's why a project like the leadership philosophy is so important, because it makes you stop and think about these things. And so I guess it's just yet another lens, how you, when you're watching other people in their leadership, you may not need to overtly ask them, how does your faith inform the way you lead? But you do look for certain characteristics. If that is something that guides your own leadership, that you look for that in other people. So I think that's definitely important. But so, yeah. Anybody else have thoughts on that, or that sort of came to mind as you were thinking through this?
I do, but I have to find it where I found it. Yeah, this came up in like just one of my posts that's just going through Kuzin Posner about, finding that it's in, like, I think in chapter 5, envisioning the future. And the one thing that struck out to me in that chapter was finding a common purpose, because that's what Danielle didn't really, talk about faith a lot, but she did talk about how she motivates athletes. And a good motivator is just asking them to kind of share what they value. And we talk about values a lot. And just finding, like, why do they get up out of bed every morning? It's just like something as simple as that. And what she does is she takes that, whatever that may be, whether it's, money, my family, education, and she was like, well, how do you express that through track and field, or something? How do you integrate that through why you're here on our track program? And then it was just cool going through the book then when we found, like, well, that's like a key component, is finding that, like, common purpose to I believe it's this one. Yeah. It's like, why do I get out of bed? Why do I do what I do? And that's like, as like Christians, that's like kind of why we live, to, share Christ and in the things that we do in the best way that we can. So I thought that was pretty cool that, like, yeah, maybe not many people have said it, but like there's so many different callings around that, there's like not one cookie cutter way of sharing Christ with other people. You can do it as an accountant, as a professor, or a coach. So I thought that was pretty cool.
That is cool. Thanks, Trolito. I think, too, like what you said, values are an excellent segue to talking about faith. When I worked at the University of South Carolina, it's not necessarily open in that respect, like you were talking about, Leanne, with Messiah being more toward facilitating that. But inevitably, whenever I talked about values with students, it led to a conversation about faith. And so it's kind of a neat sort of way to think about, because my leadership philosophy at Messiah is very different than it would have been at Messiah or at South Carolina, just because of parameters. Parameters impact that whether or not we like it or not. So, but I think it can happen in different places. It just might happen through different means. Where it's overt here, it just might be a different sort of way that we get to that conversation. So anyway, well, that's great. Thank you guys for sharing, and hopefully this was helpful to you all to learn more about what people are doing, and just the way that they're leading, and thinking through just what you value in others that you're talking to, because it does matter, because it impacts the way you sort of form your own way of thinking. So I'm going to shift gears and talk a little bit about our strategic plans. I had made a reference, I don't know if it was a week or two ago, to the SWOT analysis, and there's a video. If you haven't had a chance to watch that, I would encourage you to do that, because as you're thinking about the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, there's definitely a difference. And hopefully you guys picked up on that piece with the external and internal components. But as you're putting together, that's like a section of your project. I wanted to make sure that sort of how to think about that. And I didn't know if you guys had any questions as it came to the SWOT analysis as you were thinking about that, but I also wanted to just sort of touch base and see if there's anything I might be able to answer with that, or if you guys feel good, that's great too. So everybody's okay, or do you have any questions?
Are you able to expand on the external and internal components a little bit more? I don't know if it was a while ago that I had watched that video,
Sure.
But do you want us to break up the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, branch it off into two sections, external and internal?
No, the strengths and weaknesses are the internal. So that's going to be and it's okay, because now it's probably coming back to you.
Yeah.
So that's the strengths and weaknesses of the actual place where, or unit, functional area where you're doing your thanks. This is nice having you here. Where you're doing your SWOT analysis, and then the opportunities and threats are sort of the external pieces, the things happening at the university or the college, or things happening in sort of the greater outlook that impacts.
Outside of the department.
Yes, that will impact. For example, if you have declining numbers of students, your retention rates are really low and you're struggling with finances, then that's going to absolutely impact your potential for something. So, but that's an external, that's outside of necessarily where you're looking. So,
okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I'm able to bring something up.
Yeah.
So you can correct me if I'm wrong. But I was talking with Dottie because I was a little bit confused about this as well. And something she said that was really helpful was that something can still be outside the functional area and be within the college. So a threat or an opportunity for me, because I'm doing Gettysburg College, could be something that has to do with Gettysburg, but it's still outside of international student services, which is the functional area I'm doing. So I don't know if that's helpful, but
Yeah. Another question that had come up is, and I think this is actually a good question, you had asked this, Leanne, but the Kozus and Posner text has been extremely helpful for like the leadership philosophy, probably for the higher ed profile, for our discussions. A lot of you guys have incorporated that. But if you don't feel like it fits in your strategic plan, that's okay. That was something you had asked me. And, you know, Dickinson is probably going to be a better fit for what you're doing. Or if you find ways to incorporate it in, that's great too. But please don't feel like you need to force it into your strategic plan. Because we're looking at leadership, but we're also, this plan it's mechanical in nature in some senses, so it may not fit as well. So I just wanted to make sure you guys felt the liberty to not have to make that happen. So I guess do you guys have any other questions about the strategic plan as we kind of wind that down? We're getting, so I can't believe we're already in like week 7. But I think I sent this morning how to do a PowerPoint. One thing I didn't say in the announcement is if you have a Mac computer, it's really hard to publish it unless you save your file to a jump drive and go to a computer lab and use a PC to actually publish a PowerPoint. So just telling you. Do you guys have Macs or do you have PCs?
I have a PC.
Okay, so Ashley?
PC.
Okay.
I have a Mac, but I figured it out at this point. So
That's right. This is not your first rodeo. Okay, that's right. Okay, well, good. I just don't want to create any more stress than is necessary. So if you guys have PCs, you should be just fine if you watch those videos, and they'll tell you how to. I really want to remind you to keep them short, not to go too long, because I will have to take points off if it goes too long, and you're going to have a lot to watch. So I don't want to, have them go on forever. So, all right. Well, I'm excited. This is kind of the fun part when you start to see what everybody else is doing and hear more. I mean, a lot of you guys have brought it up in discussions, which is great, but it's fun to kind of see what you've put together for these projects. So.
And Dottie, as usual, I have questions.
Okay.
About the presentation and the paper. So with the paper, like how detailed do you want us to be with the dissemination of results section? Like, because I know for the assessment project with that section, it was just like who is supposed to, like who would benefit from these results of the evaluation?
Yeah.
Like, do you just want who, or do you want like how you're going to disseminate the results and exactly when and like all that?
No, I don't want incredible detail on like that. Who is a very important question to answer, because I think we just talked about that in the assessment class, actually. Who is your audience and who will benefit from knowing this is an important question to answer. And an idea of how you plan to get the result, or this plan out there, is good to know, but you don't need to go into the nitty gritty of that, like over detail on that.
Like, so it doesn't have to be different per, not strategic.
It should be one thing for the whole plan. One thing for the whole plan. Is that what you mean?
Like, because I know in a discussion post, I was just talking about like the importance of tailoring like communication and stuff to different stakeholders.
Yes.
But for the sake of this project, like, is it just a general question of how?
Yes, it's way more general.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then with the presentation, I know it says like one of the sections is overall results and implementation of the plan. Included in that, is that the evaluation and results dissemination, or do we not have to really touch on evaluation in there?
You won't have everything that you have in your paper, I'll tell you that now. But implementation is an important thing to cover in your presentation, because we've talked about that, at length. So just if you hit just the general implementation plan, then I don't think you have to go into detail of all those other things that are in your paper.
And the implementation plan is just like the action steps and the timeline,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Anybody else want to jump in? Are we good? Okay. Well, if you have a separate question and you want to reach out, I'll be happy to chat with you one-on-one, and that'll be great. Thank you guys so much for doing this so late. I really appreciate it. But I'm glad we could all connect and hear from each other, but also talk about this is important. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
All right. Have a good night.
Yep. Good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good night.
And thank you, Dottie, for letting me sit here. Hopefully it wasn't
Oh,
too
it was
distracting.
great.
Probably less distracting.